Hello everyone and welcome to another chess video. Today I saw this very interesting puzzle in a book and I thought I'd try and show it to you guys. So it's a bit of a challenge. The rules are that you need to place a bishop on the board, and once you've placed your bishop it'll be white to move, and as black you'll try and draw the position. So you're black, you've got to place a bishop on the board to draw the game. So take a few moments, maybe pause the video and think where you'd like to place a bishop to hold this position, and we'll try and go through it. Okay everyone, so the first place that I thought to put the bishop is actually bishop to d4. I tried this with my brother and he also opted to put it on d4. And this bishop on d4 is where most people want to place the bishop. It makes a lot of sense because the pawn protects the bishop and the bishop protects the pawn. And it was quite a solid structure. But is this construction going to be able to hold up against the king and rook? Perhaps the only problem with this is that it's a very defensive structure, so you'll have no opportunities to counterattack, and basically black will be defending the whole game. So let's see what would happen with best play. Well, if you put your bishop on d4, white will play king to c4. The best move for black is king to d6. And white will switch the play with rook to h3, and we'll keep our king in the centre with king to e6. But the problem comes now with rook to h6 with check. The king is in check and cut off from the pawn on e5. So that doesn't look too bad. The bishop protects the pawn, right? Or king to e7, and the king for white will encroach on the position with king to d5. And we don't really want to play king to d7 here, because then rook h7 is kind of annoying. So we'll move our bishop to c3. White will play rook to h5, threatening to take the pawn on e5. So black's got to be a bit clever here, so they have to be aware of the lost pawn endgame with the opposition. So for instance, if bishop to d4 here, white could just play rook takes pawn. If bishop takes, this king takes, white has the opposition, and it's a one endgame. So for this reason, black has to go king to f7. Then comes an encroaching move, king to d6. And it's a very difficult position to defend. So there's one of two moves here. Bishop d4 is one of them. But white will win with king to d7, king to f6, and rook to f5 with check, forcing the king away from the e5 pawn. There's king to e6. After the bishop moves, we can, with white, take the pawn on e5. Bishop takes, king takes, and white has the opposition with king to d6 here, and should be able to promote the pawn all the way up the board. So this is what black has to watch out for. For this reason, in this position, king e8 is the hardest move for white to win with. So king e8, let's say. And white gains the opposition with king to e6, threatening checkmate on h8. King to d8 then, and the rook cuts off the king. Bishop to d4, and this is a rather interesting way for white to win the game. White can just play rook to g7, and it forces the bishop to move once again. You don't really want to move your king away from the position. So it forces black to move the bishop up to an unprotected square. You could go b1, a1, b2, c3, sorry. Let's say bishop to c3. The point is now, after rook to d7 check, black will lose. If king e8, there's rook to c7, where you'll threaten the bishop and threaten checkmate at the same time. And if king to c8, white has cut off the king and played rook to d5, threatening to take the pawn on e5. And once the bishop moves again, in this passive defence, white can take on e5, and once bishop takes e5, this king takes e5. But white has the opposition with king f6. And if king e8, there's king e6, again with the opposition. King to d7, and now all these squares are protected by the king. Let's say king f7, there's e5, and the pawn will promote up the board. So going back to the starting position, if you placed the bishop on d4, this is actually a losing structure. It's a very defensive one. So let's take a look at another position now, which actually defends the position. So if you place your bishop on a white square, or you place your bishop specifically to bishop to d7, congratulations, you've actually managed to draw the game, or at least started to anyway. The point is that the bishop on a white square in this position particularly means that you don't have to have a defensive structure. You can have a counter-attacking structure. The point is that the bishop can expose the weakness of the e4 pawn. So when the king for white gets away from the pawn, we'll counter-attack as black. So let's see this in action. So let's say white plays rook to b6, there's king to e7, king to c4, and bishop to e6, king to c5. This looks pretty good for white. It looks like white's going to encroach in the position and easily pick up this e5 pawn. But after bishop to f7, you realise actually it's quite tricky for white to get in and take this e-pawn. Let's say rook to b7 seems like the most obvious move, which hits the king. The king can retreat to f6, securing the pawn. King d6 seems like the most obvious move now, but then comes bishop to g6, and all of a sudden the e4 pawn will fall. White has to protect this, otherwise it's a draw, so rook to b4 protects his pawn, but just bishop to h7. And how does white make progress in this position? The bishop does a great job of counter-attacking, and okay, white could potentially play rook to b5 and just win the e-pawn, but that's actually a draw in endgame if you know the technique. So king to d5, and now just bishop to g8, king to c5, and bishop to f7 is a completely drawn position. There's no way for white to progress up the board and take this pawn. You can try king to d6 once again, but then just comes bishop g6, and this rook is always stuck protecting the e4 pawn. So what do we learn from this particular challenge? Well, we learned that it's better to have an active bishop and counter-attack against the pawn rather than have a defensive bishop and just sit there passively and wait for white to make the advance. So always remember, the active bishop gives much better drawing chances, and I hope this helps with your chess in the future. If this was a helpful video, please do drop a like, comment, or even subscribe to the channel for more useful tips in the future. Hopefully this will help you with your games.